Graduated from the Executive Leadership Program at Yale University's School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. John also helped to found and is the team leader for the Community Mitigation Assistance Team, CMAT, on the National Wildland Fire Assignments. He works closely with communities on forest health initiatives aimed at creating resilient forests and safer communities, and works to restore lands impacted by recent wildfires and natural disasters. With over 20 years within emergency services as a safety officer for search and rescue team and as a wildland firefighter, he continues to work at the intersection of emergency response and community preparedness. Jonathan Bruno.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris, just want to do a real quick audio check, make sure folks in the room can hear me. And Sam, I'm wondering if you could turn on your video. I'd love to actually see the room. I don't want to be talking to the screen if possible. Yeah, that's great. Can you guys hear me? Okay, back of the room there. Perfect.
Yep, you're good.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, well, first off, I just want to apologize. I'm not there in person. Of course, as many of you know, travel is increasingly more challenging than it has been over the years. So wish I was there with you. It looks like a great facility. I'm not sure, I'm getting a little feedback, not sure if that can be adjusted or not. Yeah, let me know. I was thinking about position task books as Sam and Chris were working on this, and I almost feel like we need a virtual meeting position task book developed, and I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the task books we've worked on, but I was thinking that could be helpful. So my name is Jonathan Bruno. I'm here to talk about community wildfire mitigation. You'll notice this is the image on the screen is a picture of the 4-quadrant emergency management cycle, and really where I'm here to speak is on the mitigation phase. And so I've been working in the field. I heard a little bit of an introduction there. That's all talk if you ask me. And so words on paper and fancy titles and things like that mean little. What matters is sort of the experiences and the work that I've done and the work that you all have done. And so that matters more than any degree or any of that stuff. I work for a nonprofit. I founded an organization called Coalitions and Collaboratives. We're a nonprofit based in central Colorado that supports communities, fire departments, and entities across the country. We really care deeply about people in place, and so I want to make sure that kind of resonates through this conversation. That we can't show up into a community and provide our resources, whether that's through suppression, mitigation, or post-fire recovery, without really having a good awareness of who we're working with. We call it SA in fire, of course. We need to have SA on the social, economic, and political influences within a place, and our organization cares deeply about both of those, so the ecosystem and people. As I'm going through this presentation with you all, and I'm going to skip a few slides just to open it up for some more discussion, but I just wanted to raise awareness to the NWCG Wildland Urban Interface Mitigation Field Guide. There's a QR code up there, and I will be sending this information over to Chris so he can share it out with you all. But I just wanted to share that a lot of the information that I'll speak to is within this guide. Our organization, as well as quite a few subject matter experts, were involved in the development of it. It's a pretty good starting place for us as we're thinking about better integrating wildfire resiliency and mitigation into our work. A few things I'm going to hit on today. Something I call the national mitigation infrastructure, just a big picture concept, guiding principles, some of the things that we use as we're working with communities, players, and programs, and then some resources that I want to share from our organization. So this mitigation infrastructure concept really was born from the realization that we're really good at suppressing fire. We have the resources. Yes, fires are changing. The types of fires that we fought 20 years ago are different than what we're dealing with today. We're seeing development, growth, structures, urban conflagrations. But But what we were seeing was we're really good at suppressing fire, but we weren't really good at developing the systems and the infrastructure necessary to support pre-fire risk reduction activities. And this concept of the mitigation infrastructure is something that we've really hung our hat on, and is something that I'll dive into in depth, talking about what we're doing to really build out this infrastructure. But before I do that, I just wanted to make sure that we have some common language. So oftentimes prevention and mitigation get used interchangeably. I see it in different parts of our country. According to the National Response Plan, the National Fire Plan, prevention is defined as actions taken to avoid an incident or to intervene. So ultimately this is to stop an incident from occurring, whereas mitigation is the effort to reduce loss of life and property, lessening the impact from the wildfire that we know will occur. And so what's really important about this is prevention is focused in on, I always joke, man, woman, and child, the 3 top causes of fire, and mitigation is focused on how we prepare for the fire when it does occur. Here in the Front Range of Colorado, we have a lot of ignitions through lightning strikes, and so we know there will be a fire. Mitigation is about what we're doing to prepare for it. Urban interface, I just bring this up, not fully aware of who's in the room. I just want to be really clear too that within the wildland urban interface, just because we call it the wildland urban interface, it doesn't mean that it's a specific risk profile, right? So we could have a wildland urban interface that has a very significant risk profile where we have really tight homes, structures, structure ignition is real, fencing that includes, that connects those structures. And when we talk about the wildland urban interface, it's not a direct correlation to risk. We focus on these areas, of course, because these are the areas where we are seeing those wildland fires that are entering into our communities. The response, this is, from your neck of the woods there, this is from a report that was put together that really sort of highlights this concept that we're never going to apparatus, fire truck our way out of this issue. We're good at it. 2% of the fires get beyond the initial attack stage. We're quite skilled, but the reality is the situation is such that we're not going to be able to respond the way we have in the past. We're seeing more fires. This example from the Dixie fire is really telling as to the amount of person days, the amount of time, that little sort of yellow line, a dozer line, built over 3,500 miles of containment line that could connect Seattle to Chicago. You start to really think about this, and all of you thinking about those resources that we're putting out there, it's real. And as we start to see more of these larger fires occurring on the landscape, the reality is that we're not going to be able to put another truck on it. I think Tom Harbour had said, it is this concept of we can't one more engine, one more hand crew our way out of this. We've got ourselves into a big problem. It's taken some time. It's going to take some energy and effort to get our way out of it. And so I just want to emphasize that that's really this framing where we're coming from. Is the reality is we're not going to one more engine our way out of the wildfire crisis. So this basic concept here is risk is it's a simple equation. It's hazard and vulnerability. So this concept is that wildfire likelihood is based on an annual probability of wildfire burning in a specific location. Intensity is measured through the energy output. And exposure is a spatial coincidence of wildfire likelihood and intensity to hit those communities. We pretty much describe this through the concept of proximity of home to fuels, and then susceptibility is really focused in on this propensity of a home or a community to be damaged if a fire occurs. So framing this through this concept of let's understand what risk looks like. It's truly this combination of hazard and that vulnerability. So how do we start to address some of these issues? We use several specific sort of processes in our conversations. This one being relatively basic is this concept of a continuum. So there's never a signpost. that's going to be put at the end of a community that says, yep, we're good, we're all protected. Really, mitigation, wildfire risk reduction, resiliency, whatever you want to call it, just not prevention, is about this ongoing process where we're continually adapting to information, we're continually getting new impact, we're having new fires, new development. And so this continuum is based on assessing risks, prioritizing actions, hardening homes, creating D-space. You can read this, doing the work on the ground, tracking and evaluating progress, and then ultimately celebrating those successes. And I'll hit a little bit more about celebrating successes later, but it's really important that we look at this through the concept of a continuum. So I'll just ask a question here. So who in the room is aware of the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy? Raise your hand if you're aware of that. All right, so a few folks, I think. How many? Did anyone raise their hand?
One or two.
Okay, cool. So I bring this up because this is some of the work that we're doing. I know this text is probably small for y'all. So the National Cohesive Strategy is based on these 3 tenets, and the 3 tenets are resilient landscapes, fire adapted communities, and safe and effective wildfire response. And this is out of the fire plan. This is original work that was put together by the feds and informed by all of our states that were having different types of fires across the country. A lot of the work with the cohesive strategy occurred early on when we started to see these fires changing on our landscape. I think of 2002 as one of the sort of pivotal years. We had the Biscuit Fire. We had some big fires here in Colorado. Hundreds of thousands of acres burned, and historically we hadn't been seeing that. So the cohesive strategy was born, as well as several other initiatives from the federal level that really put in motion some of the things that we all are working on today, whether we know it or not. And so the cohesive strategy is this sort of the 3 legs of the stool. And we sort of look at that through a different lens, though. And I'll tell you, the image kind of shows the way I look at it. And so you see fire adapted at the top. So we look at the cohesive strategy through this lens of the fire adapted communities concept is actually an umbrella. And under that are these concepts of resilient landscapes and wildfire response. So we look at this through this concept of an entire system. It encompasses the actions taken before and after a fire. And it really sort of emulates through what I've called suppression's too late, mitigation's the emergency. So that sentiment underscores the urgent need to prioritize mitigation efforts and community engagement. And it's essential that we really broaden the way we think about fire adaptation to not just be one leg of the stool, but to actually be integrated into how we respond to, how we manage our lands, how we work with our communities. So it's vital that we really think about it through this fire adapted communities lens, because it highlights that we can all do better. So we can collaborate better with individuals, with entities, we can work better with our responders, as well as with our businesses, because frankly, we all have a lot to lose here. So it's my recommendation that we really start to think about understanding our work, whether it's from suppression, from mitigation, from the private, the nonprofit, the public sector, that we really start to think about this as an overarching concept or an umbrella. So the national mitigation infrastructure is built out of this concept of, you know what, we've done a really good job of building a suppression animal, let's call it animal, the suppression resources that include qualifications, training, workforce development. We have position task books. We have the resources. We have the ordering systems in place that if an incident does occur, currently we can order those resources overnight. We can get them there really quickly to respond, but we do not have that system in place for the mitigation resources. And so the mitigation infrastructure is based on concepts of wildland fire response, and it's integrating all of those pieces of the puzzle. So it's developing the positions, mitigation positions, it's developing training, knowledge, skills, and abilities, as well as jobs. And so, we have these sort of the 3 pieces of the puzzle here. So the mitigation continuum, wildland-fire cohesive strategy, and then really building out the mitigation workforce. A few of the guiding principles that we work under as we're doing this work, and we all work with our communities, and some of these are kind of the ahas, yeah, we knew that, but I got to tell you, oftentimes what I have found, if we don't pause and think about the way we're doing work, we miss some of these really critical steps. So the mitigation principles are foundation for effectively working with communities, actually, frankly, working together. They're keys to increasing the local capacity, because like I said, we don't have the people. And they're frankly the foundation for which action-focused programs should be built. So I'm going to run through these really quick. So we all have these assumptions. So how many legs on the elephant do you see? We assume. We say things like the reason our community doesn't mitigate is because they're unaware of the risk, because they don't have the money, because they don't care. And the reality is that the barriers to mitigation, they truly do vary widely. And we want to make sure that we're taking the time to actually pull back those assumptions and ask ourselves, what is it truly that's holding communities back? So we've done some research over the years in partnership with various social science entities, and what we have found is that in communities, the things that stop people from doing work are not as simple as we believe them to be. In this day and age, guess what? Money's a big part of it, but it's not always the part of it as to why people aren't doing private property mitigations. And so I just want to make sure that we all understand and take pause when we stand up in front of a room and say, guess what? The reason my community doesn't do this work is because they don't know about the risk. They're not educated. Whatever it might be, take pause. It's not cookie cutter. So when we develop mitigation strategies, steal ideas, that's the highest form of flattery, right? It's like, don't recreate the wheel, but be very aware that a chipper program potentially that you've developed in one part of California, one part of Colorado might not work in the other area. And so take a special concern to the community demographics, the values. Every community has different values, terrain, hazards, so on. And so just like a thumb print, take the time. And I apologize, some of these are kind of overly cute for my style, but they're pretty funny nonetheless. Who's been in a meeting where you have this going on? Well, don't show up at the meeting thinking you're going to engage your community or work with other people if you show up like this, because frankly, I've been in meetings like this where we have people sort of the bully pulpit, we have the loud voice, they're going to tell you exactly what we need to do. And so engagement's a two-way process. Shut up and listen, take the time first to understand the motives, and go from there. All right, so we do this thing, and I got to tell you, I continually have requests for funding, requests for support, where we're going to do a tabling event. Okay, that's great. Guess what happens to those brochures that you leave on a table? Do they all make it home? No. You probably are picking them out of the trash when you're cleaning up after the event. So ask yourself if the investment in those type of tabling events, those brochures, those handouts are actually doing what you intend them to do. Take the time to engage in person. So if you have tabling events, you have brochures, you have that type of information, that's fine. But make sure that you have real people that are actually communicating with your community in the languages that they speak, and that you are making direct connections with the individuals. Otherwise, all you're doing is handing out fire starters and trash. Consider the message as well as the messenger. So if some communities are going to be more respectful for folks in uniform, other communities might not be. They might be distrusting of the individuals that show up in a uniform. So be very aware of the demographics. This is from Alpine, Wyoming. This is doing a site visit with the chief up there, Chief Voigt in Alpine, and we were working with the individual there in the purple sweater who came into the fire station and said, I want to learn about what I can do to prepare my home and my community. And we were going to run out the door with her individually, but we convinced her to call out the phone train and pull in the neighbors. And so take advantage of those moments to really, there are spark plugs in our communities, ask them to help, host events in the field, and make sure that you're using, in this situation, a respected authority. Focus on the ROI. I've heard this as well. We're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. I've said it. You all have probably said something like that in the past. But let's stop wasting our time. Don't throw the spaghetti to see what sticks. Take the time to really develop strategic tactical plans that are going to lead to the outcome, and the outcome being reducing risk and exposure for communities, reducing the hazard. So think strategically, act tactically, like you all do. Build partnerships. In the fire world, I've always joked I don't have the secret handshake. Well, it's true. I don't have the secret handshake. I'm a nonprofit professional that's worked over 27 years in response, and I still don't know the secret handshake. And so part of that is because the fire culture, the fire world is really institutionally limited in terms of how far out we reach and how many people we talk to, how many people we bring to the table. Bringing more people to the table means more work. There's no question. It means more food to get eaten. But I will say that the only way we're going to be able to resolve or work towards solutions to minimize our risk is to really make sure you're building your partnerships and think creatively about the who. It's not always your conventional partners, those folks that work in the fire space. It potentially could be social services organizations, health organizations. Faith-based groups are groups that we work with quite a bit. The churches that are ready to go and have work parties. We have a program that's called Help the Needy, where our faith-based organizations provide all of the log hauling for us because they turn that into firewood and give it to communities across the Front Range of Colorado. There's an example here from Palmer Lake, Colorado. There's a Front Range. It's just high risk, scary area. We have Palmer Lake Fire. We have a nonprofit organization that I work with. We have local U.S. Forest Service, and then we also have the Air Force Academy cadets. And if you've worked with Air Force folks before, the cadets, it's great because they're told what to do and they do it. And so you can see we made light work of a pretty big 7-acre mitigation event. This is part of Wildfire Community Preparedness Day in May. Make it accessible. Historically, we've provided funding through post-project reimbursement-based grants or granting programs that provide funding directly to people that have the resources. We've done a good job protecting communities that have the resources, have money. I've done a lot of work with folks that have mansions. And that's important, but so too is protecting, manufactured home communities and facilities. And so we want to make sure that we're being really thoughtful about how we're designing our programs and making sure that we're really adjusting to local demographics. Leverage the resources. We're oftentimes funded directly through federal funding or state funding. Be very, very aware that we need to ask. We call it skin in the game. Make sure that residents are paying if they can afford it. Make sure that local municipalities are providing resources to help offset the expenses of mitigation. Focus on outcomes over outputs. An output is number of brochures handed out, CWPPs created. Did you create one? That's great. What have you done with it? There's always this joke going around. If you create a CWPP, put $100 in it, put it on the shelf. And if you go back in 5 years, that $100 is gone. Success. I think we're seeing CWPPs change a little bit. They're starting to be more useful, but potentially developing a 500-page document that maybe has 5 pages of actual actions isn't going to get you to the same place. So really be thinking about what are the outcomes we want, and those outcomes really need to be resilient communities and ecosystems. Know what you can, be knowledgeable, working in the space. The reason I asked the question about the cohesive strategy is it's important to understand sort of context, but be really aware that there are folks that work in the space that potentially could help along the way. There are partners that can support you. If you don't have the information as it relates to mitigation, by all means, reach out. Same old thinking, same old results. I got to tell you, I feel like we do this all the time. We wonder why things keep happening, and then we actually don't change anything. So stop doing it if it's not working, and maybe a pause for you all is like, can you think of something that you do that doesn't work, whether that's personal life or professional life? There's a lot of things that we do in this world that we continue to do it, and we wonder why we're not getting to a different outcome. So be like the iguana. So we all have this responsibility to think differently, to act differently, to be more inclusive. These guiding principles really are intended to enhance the way that you think about the work. Refer to them. Have I considered all the angles? Do I know someone who has, Jeremy Taylor with Colorado Springs Fire and now with Colorado Springs Utilities is a good friend. I've worked with him for a long time. He works on the Catamount fuel team as well, which is a utilities-based response team. And he always says, I know a fella. And so do you know a fella? Ask yourself that. How can you make your program more effective? What are the outputs? What's actually leading to the outcomes? And use this as a bit of a lens to look through here. So I didn't cut this one, policies, plans, and resources. I just want to really emphasize that there are the cohesive strategy. There's a lot of work that's coming out right now. There's the several things in Washington being pushed out regarding creating a national response entity. So moving USDA responsibilities for fire over to DOI and creating a response organization. I just urge you all to, be aware, take the time to understand what the policymakers are talking about, because frankly, if we're not putting in our voice and providing our comments, there's going to be some pie in the sky ideas that float 50,000 feet above the ground, and we're all going to have to deal with it. So be aware of the policies and reach out if you have questions. So there's so many groups working in the space, and this by no means is comprehensive. The national groups, U.S. Fire Administration kind of stepped up in the last few years in a big way. That's FEMA, NRCS, and National Forest Foundation, Bureau of Land Management. Those are all sort of those national groups. Wildland Fire Leadership Council is one that's potentially on the chopping block, but that's an organization of all the agency and department heads that sits together and talks about this and tries to make decisions. The state agencies such as Cal Fire, New Jersey Forest Service, Colorado State Forest Service, and then there's quite a few NGOs that are working in the space. So those non-governmental organizations, COCO falls in that, but there are several other that I think are important that potentially you haven't learned about. So under the Watershed Research and Training Center, which is up in Hayfork, the fire networks, they have the FACNet, Fire Adapted Communities, but the Prescribed Fire Learning Network, the training exchanges, hopefully you all have had an opportunity to go out on those, and then Indigenous Peoples Burning Network, Headwaters Economics. And then there are these players, the local players. But I'll tell you that when I think about the players in program, I feel like oftentimes we look at this as top down. We say, oh, well, the feds are the ones that are controlling this. And while they do have funding and resources, I'll tell you, we need to flip that. And it should be the residents, the local communities that are truly supporting that work. All of those NGOs that I mentioned are a part of this group called the FACT Collaborators. Horrible name, but it's an entity of individuals and organizations that are all funded by the USDA Forest Service or DOI in some capacity. So this is Fire Administration supports it, USDA Forest Service, of course, sits on it, iChiefs, and then these other groups, the National Volunteer Fire Council, different entities. And part of the reason that this group exists is because we're really good at doing work. But I think across the board, across all of our sectors, we're not always good at doing work together. And so we've pulled this group together to start doing a better job. Fire Adapted Communities is one that's really taken a lot of interest or really sort of gained a lot of momentum. You may have heard of it. The two programs out there that sort of a lot of folks talk about are FireWise and Fire Adapted Communities. Fire Adapted Communities is more of a verb. FireWise potentially could be a noun or a verb depending on how you describe it. So it could be the sign on the edge of a community, or it could be I FireWise my property. People use it in different ways. But Fire Adapted Communities is that comprehensive component related to the cohesive strategy. So it focuses on the what, the who, and the when. And so once again, I know it's hard to see, but it's focused on public health, prevention, regulation, infrastructure, recovery, safety and evacuation, response, resident mitigation, partnerships, and landscape treatments. And so for each of these areas, fire adapted communities can provide resources, subject matter experts. So who's involved in it? Like I said, we oftentimes forget some people. We forget about, sort of the private businesses. Academia, of course, is really important. We want to make sure that we're using the best available science. Business and tourism, a lot of the communities we work in, we were doing some work over in Pigeon Forge. Some of you may have been on some of those fires over there, Rocky Top. That's a community that is entirely defined by the fact that no one lives, there's a small percentage of people live there, and the rest of it are these, they call them cabins, but they're, mountain condos. And if we're not including businesses and tourism into our strategies to reduce risk, we're failing. And of course, it does function before, during, and after. So real quick to close us out here. Our organization, so coalitions and collaboratives, we developed this concept of the infrastructure. We've been working on this. It really stemmed from my experience going to communities in the West over and over again and seeing the same thing. We're responding to a fire, we do good work. We come back maybe a year or two, depending on the return interval, and the community is kind of in the same situation. We're seeing the same indicators, the same challenges. So we, under a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, under what's called a cooperative agreement, we work directly with the Forest Service to deliver a program called Action, Implementation, and Mitigation. And this is based on sort of these 6 tenets, 6 specific things that we work on. So we want to work to develop local program sustainability. So that's supporting your places, your communities, your areas, those organizations, NGOs, fire departments you work with. We provide funding through what I call we've built a catcher's mitt, and we've built a pretty darn big catcher's mitt. We try to grab as much funding as possible and move that from so the highest levels to the ground. We do that through a way of minimizing our indirect. I hate the middleman. I mean, it drives me nuts when you look at $1 million that gets whittled away, and ultimately a community receives $250,000 of $1 million because everyone needs to touch it because they're an expert. And so we really wanted to develop a system to allow funding to get to those places, potentially those small communities. We also do on-site engagement. We train communities and responders and mitigators in best practices. And then we provide the mentorship and support as well as technical expertise. If you're thinking about doing biochar or an air curtain burner or broadcast burning, we know a fellow, and oftentimes that's me. So one of the things I'm most proud of is the number of new staff that we've helped to support through the AIM program, 246. We've knocked out some acres, we've burned some things, but really what I care about is the capacity for us to continue to do this work, and that's where we need to be focusing in. So AIM, one of the programs is called the Community Mitigation Assistance Team. This is an interagency strike team of mitigation professionals that you can order. So your community, your fire department can order in collaboration with the USDA Forest Service, if your community is at high risk of fire, or if you're seeing fire activity in your community. We have found that working with communities when smoke is in the air is actually the most effective. People are very responsive. This is a video here of New Bern, North Carolina. The slider is showing this is development in 5 years. And so we were invited out to the Croatan National Forest to provide some support through CMAT to really help them to address this challenge. How do you address this when your fire departments are under-resourced? How do you address urban development and growth if you don't have, like California Wildland Fire Code? And so CMAT can help in numerous ways. We're ordered through IROC, and so all of the responders, all the folks on the team have an amazing wealth of knowledge, but are paid for through through federal funding arrangements. We've developed the wildfire mitigation specialist positions. So these are two positions that Chris actually was a part of, helping us work on. So this is all through the NWCG WUI Mitigation Committee. We have these positions in place, and we're piloting this year to have those individuals, those positions, those resources provide immediate assistance in wildfire mitigation activities. I want to be clear that they're not running chainsaws, but they're really working with communities to make sure that we're engaging the critical capacity of community members when the time is right. Oftentimes, residents are in a fire that are in pre-evacuation or just outside of those pre-evacuation zones are asking us, what do you do? What can we do right now? And we can help to minimize the drain on the IMT or the teams by getting in and working directly with them. So when things do start to heat up, they've actually taken some of those actions. We also really focus in on this workforce component. So we've developed several trainings. Mitigation 101, love the arrows. Mitigation 101 is really focused in on this infrastructure fire behavior. We are finding that the sector is changing, meaning that historically it was responders that were doing mitigation work as other duties during their fire career, whereas now we're starting to see planners. We're starting to see counties hiring mitigation specialists, and some of those individuals potentially don't have any fire experience. And so we've developed a training course to kind of get folks up to speed. Additionally, we provide the mitigation best practices course. This is within IQCS is N9073. This is a course that really dives deep into developing mitigation strategies, developing mitigation tactics for communities. And then ultimately, this other thing that keeps happening is, so in 2003, the Healthy Forest Restoration Act put in place requirements for communities to have these community wildfire protection plans. We did a really good job at writing a ton of plans. I've written over 27 of them. There's probably 2 that I really actually like. But we host this training because a lot of those plans are old, they're dated, and they're coming up to be renewed. The Community Wildfire Defense Grants funded a lot of new plans, and we were getting calls from communities saying, how do we do this? How can we make a plan that's lower cost? How can it be something that's useful that doesn't sit on a shelf? And so we've developed the Leading the Modern Community Wildfire Protection Plan training. I never got into this work thinking I was going to be a trainer. That wasn't the original intent. Back in the day, I got into it because I thought fire was seasonal. And I could go skiing during the winter. Little did I know that, and probably many of you, little did you know that this is fully something that has engulfed my professional career. And so I spend a lot of time really investing in helping to raise awareness. I've done a lot of dumb things, and I want to make sure that you don't have to go through those same things. So this QR code here will take you to our organization. Will give you some details, more information there. Open it up for questions. I'm not sure. I've got it looks like maybe 10 minutes or so. Just love to hear from you all if you've got any burning questions or comments.
Anybody got any questions for John? Looks like none in the room, John. We really appreciate it. Thank you for giving us 45 minutes to an hour of your time.
Very welcome. Very welcome. Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out. We're doing a lot of funding in California and parts, and so some of the organizations you may be working with are groups that we're potentially supporting. So appreciate you all. Be safe.
And I will put a plug in right now for the Community Wildfire Best Practices course. I did take that course. It's a great course. It opened my eyes as a suppression forward person. We have a lot of municipal folks in this room. Most of your fire chiefs are all appointed by either the Board of Supervisors, the city manager, the mayor, whoever that may be. And so they've got someone they've got to answer to, and oftentimes the answer is, well, we'll just throw more fire engines at it. If I just had a couple more engines, like John was saying, that is not a sustainable response anymore. So really think about the mitigation stuff and take that back to your departments and answer or ask some of those questions with your peers and come up with some answers that you can bring back and help make that situation better. All right, John, I'll be in touch with you later. Thanks, buddy.